Hello, my name is Colby Oliverson and I work in the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, and part of my role here is to serve as the administrative rules economist. What I hope to accomplish in these videos is to teach you how to conduct a regulatory impact analysis using the GOMB criteria. To help accomplish that, I've created an example that we will use throughout the videos to help teach the analysis. In this video, we will do a brief overview of the 4 steps and then focus on step 1. And in the following videos, we will go over the other 3 steps. So first, I want to answer the question, why is the analysis necessary? So Executive Order number 2017-1 and House Bill 272 of the 2017 General Legislative Session jointly require state rule filing entities to conduct a thorough regulatory impact analysis consistent with the criteria established by the Governor's Office of Management and Budget when filing a proposed rule. And what we are going over today is a summarized version of that criteria. So as we go throughout the presentation, I want you to remember that there is not one right answer to this analysis. There are good, better, and best answers and also incorrect answers. Ultimately, at the end of the day, rule filing entities need to be able to defend and own their analyses and their rationale behind the analyses if they are ever called upon to do so. And so with that, let's introduce our example. So our proposed rule is this. Local food truck license fees will decrease $1,000 next fiscal year and remain the same rate every year thereafter. So where do we start? Well, let's move over to a Word document I've created. It's a step-by-step guide. As we go throughout this training, we'll be flipping through multiple screens, some Word documents, the internet, and using our PowerPoint here. So first off, let's actually go through the 4 steps and then we'll focus on step 1 in this video. So step 1 is to identify those affected due to the proposed rule. Step 2 is to count the number of affected individuals. Step 3 is to estimate the fiscal impacts to the affected parties. And then step 4 is to record the required information in the eRule system, which we'll go over later, and attach the fiscal analysis table in your rule filing, which is also in eRules. So let's scroll down here and go to step 1. And we'll start with the top half of the document here where it says step 1, identify those affected. Right below it says group those affected into the following classes before you start your 4-step analysis. Now the classes that can be affected are the following: state government, local government, small businesses with fewer than 50 employees, and later on in step 2, I'll explain how you can find out how many employees affected businesses have. The 4th class is non-small business, which are businesses with more than 50 employees. And the final affected class is other persons, which are organizations, citizens, or simply just individuals. Okay, so now let's apply this step to our example, the proposed rule with the food trucks. So I'm going to pull up a blank Word document here to record our thoughts and findings. So ask yourself, who will be affected by this proposed rule? First, what comes to my mind are the food trucks. Food trucks will be paying less money for their licenses. So food trucks could possibly fall into 2 of the classes that we just talked about. The first is small business, and the second possibility is non-small business. Non-small business. Who else might be affected? Well, we know that local governments will be affected because these food trucks will be paying less money for their local food truck license fees. So I'll put local government. And who else could be affected? Well, since small businesses and non-small businesses, the food trucks companies, will be paying less money, their costs are decreasing. Theoretically, we could say food truck customers might be affected in that they could receive lower prices for their food that they purchase from the food trucks, as the food truck companies will have lower costs. And food truck customers would go under the category of other individuals. So I'm going to write other individuals, and a subheading I'll put food truck customers. And also another group that comes to my mind are the food truck employees. Since the food truck companies will have lower costs, they could theoretically pass those food truck savings to the employees who they employ. So I'll write food truck employees. Now, this is a really important part of the analysis. You really got to get this right, otherwise the analysis won't hold up later on. And so this is a step that you want to spend time on in identifying all of the affected parties from proposed rules. Make sure you're as thorough as you can be in thinking who might be affected. We thought of the food truck customers and the food truck employees because the food truck companies might pass those savings on to the customers and employees. So just be sure to spend a good amount of time on this part of the analysis. Okay, so now we have finished this part of the analysis, step 1A. Let's move to step 1B. I'll go back to our step-by-step guide here, and we'll move to step 1B, which is to identify the impacts. So right here, we see a bunch of different impacts that the affected parties can experience. There's costs and there's benefits, and then there's direct and indirect impacts, fiscal and non-fiscal, and inestimable impacts. What we'll do is break down these impacts and go over each of the different words in our PowerPoint. So I'll pull that up and go back up here. So the first group is cost and benefit. Cost is an impact that has a negative implication. Benefit is an impact that has a positive implication. Next group is fiscal and non-fiscal. Fiscal is an impact that involves money. Non-fiscal is an impact that does not involve money. We'll move to direct and indirect. So to understand direct and indirect impacts, we first need to understand the concept of a constrained party. So now we'll move to the next slide. So the constrained party is the party whose behavior is being limited, constrained, or sometimes even expanded. They are the party who is being affected the most. They are oftentimes named in the rule. That can be a good clue to help identify the constrained party. And the constrained party is the only party that can experience a direct impact. So all the other parties on the outside of the web who are connected to the constrained party are the indirectly impacted parties. Only these parties on the outside of the web are those who can experience indirect impacts. So to review, only the constrained party can experience direct impacts, and only the parties on the outside of the web can experience indirect impacts. So the last definition we'll go over is inestimable. An inestimable fiscal impact is a fiscal cost or fiscal benefit that cannot be quantified because the relevant data is unavailable and the cost of acquiring the relevant data is prohibitively expensive. And we really want to avoid characterizing impacts as inestimable, but sometimes it will be necessary because, like it says here, when the relevant data is unavailable and the cost of acquiring that data is just too much. It would take too much time or cost too much. So whenever characterizing an impact as inestimable, just remember that rule filing entities need to be able to defend their rationale behind characterizing an impact as inestimable. Okay, so now that we have those definitions down, we're going to apply this to our example and identify the impacts to all of our affected parties. So our first group were the food truck companies, and those fell under small business and non-small business. So we'll start at the top, small business. Are the food truck companies the constrained party? We identified the food truck companies as the constrained party, so therefore they will experience direct impacts. Do the impacts involve money? Yes, they do, so that's a fiscal impact. And is it a positive or negative implication for food trucks? It's positive, they're saving money, so we characterize that as a direct fiscal benefit. So we'll move to non-small business. This is the same. It's the food truck companies. They fall under non-small business. They are the constrained party, so direct impact. The impact involves money, so it's fiscal and has a positive implication, direct fiscal benefit for non-small businesses. Local governments. Are they the constrained party? No, they are not. This group is on the outside of the web, so they can experience only indirect impacts. Does the impact involve money? Yes, it does. The local governments will be receiving less money for those food truck licenses, so we'll call that a fiscal impact. And does it have a positive or negative implication? It has a negative implication. The local governments will be receiving less money, less revenue, so we will call that a cost. Indirect fiscal cost for local governments. Now we'll move to other individuals. First group is food truck customers. They are not the constrained party, so they can experience only indirect impacts. Does the impact involve money? Our rationale was that food truck companies could theoretically pass on their savings to food truck customers in the form of lower prices for the food they purchase. So we are going to call that a fiscal impact. And that is a positive implication for food truck customers, so we will call that a benefit. Food truck customers will experience an indirect fiscal benefit. Lastly, food truck employees. They are not the constrained party, so that is an indirect impact. Does it involve money? Yes, it does. Food truck companies could pass on their savings to food truck employees in the form of higher wages, so we will call that a fiscal impact. And it has a positive implication, so that is a benefit. Food truck employees will experience an indirect fiscal benefit. And that's step one. We identified the affected parties and we identified the types of impacts that each of these affected parties will experience. In the next video, we will go over step two, which is to count the number of affected individuals in each of these affected parties.